Hey, what's going on, everyone? It is David Palmer, the Leo King, and Dylan, the Human Design Maven, for Before Dawn here on High Vibe TV. Hope everybody's doing wonderful today on this July the 20th of 2022. How are you doing, Dylan?
Doing well. Living the dream.
Just holding down the wisdom as I was just doing the pre-show.
Anchoring the wisdom.
You anchor the wisdom extremely well.
Thank you.
And I'm sorry that I wasn't here last week, but you held the wisdom down for us last week.
It was a pleasure.
It meant a lot to me.
For sure, brother.
Now that we're really into this show,
yeah.
You know, I don't know if people know this, but, you know, Dylan and I are both manifesting generators that said that with this show, we're going to not plan so much, but go off our gut.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like it's always in alignment, just how this show really is going into talking about the astrology transits of now, especially this Mars-Uranus conjunction with this North Node that's approaching. And it's been pretty amazing to see a lot of people out there in the spiritual community that are actually bringing it up more than, you know, it's like one of those transits where it's like, wow, people are actually talking about a transit opposed to a full moon or an eclipse.
Right. Yeah. There's a sense of the importance of it, I think, because it's already happening. You know, we've already got Uranus there. It's been there for a while. Uranus loves these long periods of stasis, these long periods of seeming nothing happening, and then boom, drops in a completely new mutation or a completely new approach of whatever gate it's in. And this is gate 2. So it's the gate of direction, and it corresponds to the magnetic monopole, which in human design, the magnetic monopole is this really interesting factor of your design that literally is a magnet that pulls you in one direction, that direction being your destined path. And what is that destined path defined by? Not so much things like karma or even your thoughts. This destined path is literally a geometry, a geometric orientation that you come into the world with through the uniqueness of your design. It's just like if your design is like a unique frequency, that frequency pulls you and things that match that frequency into your experience. And the crazy, crazy part about the magnetic monopole is that it's actually what holds us together in this illusion. So the G center is called the G center because it's a center of gravity. And that means that gravity, which is really just the force of love of the universe, is holding us in this separateness, that I'm a separate being than you, that we have different differentiated directions to go in. And Ra was talking about this magnetic monopole probably about 20 years before quantum physics actually discovered it, that it's a real thing. So it's kind of one of the, you know, claims to fame of the human design system, I think. So gate 2, where this Uranus-Mars North Node conjunction is going to be happening, really is a gate that takes in all the possibilities, all the possible timelines, all the possible paths, and it synthesizes them and it chooses the best route. So it's like this inner calculus that our energy does for us to keep us course correcting, keep us navigating towards that true destination that is our true frequency. So gate 2 is highly mutative in nature. It's about going in the direction of your greatest mutation, of your greatest evolution, of your greatest differentiation. And all 3 of these celestial bodies, Uranus, Mars, North Node, are going to be in the 6th line of gate 2, which means that it's a very narrow path, because the 6th line is very selective. The 6th line only wants to engage in things that it can see have true value and that are going to actually be able to complete the mutation. So a 6th line will kind of sit on the fence maybe half their lives, because there's that inner sense that the things that are being offered to them don't match their true mutative potential. So when I see a 6th line in a transit, it's about this very narrow window or a very narrow bandwidth that is basically kind of selecting who's going to be able to make the mutation. And obviously, because we live in this dualistic universe, there's going to be the not self version of the mutation, where people are going to literally be almost cut off from their true trajectory, you know, with genetic manipulation and just how much interference is happening right now. Or they're going to be like refocused. It's almost like a gift of like the jumper cables, you know, or like the defibrillator, where it's like everybody that has actually put in a consistent path, you know, a consistent practice or a consistent commitment to their unique direction and trusting their gut or trusting their inner authority. It's like this transit kind of quantum leaps you. It like bends time and space to get you further along towards your true mutation. So it is, in a sense, as I think anything with the nodes is kind of like wormhole in nature. So it's kind of like a culling energy, I feel. It's like those who are going to be viable to actually mutate in an evolutionary way kind of get this benefit of this bridging the gap, bending space and time to bring you closer to your trajectory or your geometry. And those that don't have that grounding and that root system within their own design and within their own freedom, within their own consciousness, are kind of going to get derailed. That's really what the energy that it feels like to me with these three together. It's like derailing it.
It reminds me of like the knob on a radio when you're tuning to the frequency, and instead of just accepting the static and whatever, it's that narrow bandwidth that you have to get the strong signal with, or it feels off almost like, especially with Uranus being there and the North Node, just them two are very they're extreme on themselves. And it's interesting because they're both going to be in Taurus, and then Mars coming in here is, if you really think of Mars being so focus oriented as well and directional, and Uranus being that bandwidth where if you tap into the right frequency, it's pretty much infinite from there. Like you can actually go farther in life when you actually tune into the right frequency in your life. It makes a lot of sense to me that this gate would be really, I don't know if maybe you would call it serious, but I would say it feels serious as far as not wanting to be derailed, especially as you were bringing up like the root in people and human design. I mean, it just reminded me of like being derailed on a train, like just completely like not
connected to anything,
connected or feeling too maybe lackadaisical, like, oh yeah, this train's kind of on the tracks, you know, and then the turn comes and then just
pile up.
And also it's in Taurus, so I don't know if you could put that up, Brian. I just wanted to show people that, I mean, I'm doing this for right now at this moment, but we're at this moment where it's an approach too. It's one to really pay attention to, I would say, because this is what July is going to be about, like the peak of July here. I know there's a lot of other stuff going on, but as an astrologer, like this is a very rare event to occur. And the fact that it's happening in Taurus is even, you know, more rare. You know, it's one of those things where it's a once in a lifetime transit for us as a collective. And especially Taurus is about finding the better way in life just by itself. So this gate that it's happening in, what degrees of Taurus does it cover? Is it like, because it's interesting, right? You know, in astrology, the constellation, of course, being in Taurus, you know, but if you understand the sidereal understanding of things, you know, this is where it's the end of Aries and the beginning of Taurus. And in Vedic, it would be, you know, Kritika, where you could really start to get into the end of, but it's actually going to be happening in Aries in the sidereal. But in Western here, it's happening in an area
18 degrees.
The 18 degrees, which is kind of an interesting place for it to happen, I would say, because when the South Node in Taurus met with Uranus at 18 was in 1939, when Hitler invaded Poland.
Wow. And
it was a very extreme time of course, war and people really being, like you said earlier, kind of derailed in their lives.
What's also interesting about this gate 2 is that, in human design, we look at things in terms of individual gates, but also the channel that they're a part of. And this is part of the 214, which is called the channel of the beat. So like the beat of life, the beat of your heart, the beat of your own drum that you're, marching along to. And the other half of the channel in 14 is all about resources. It's all about the mundane material world and managing resources and, every form that they take, not just money, but energy, contacts, skills. It's all about being really embedded in the material world in order to fill up your wagon, so to speak, to get all that good stuff in life. And so the risk here with gate 2 is that what might actually derail us is a preoccupation with the material. So being too focused on just the money and the black and white of things, and I have money in my bank account, so my life is good, but there's a higher purpose to your design, to your life. And if you're ignoring that just because you're materially comfortable, then this is kind of like a missing the boat window of like, well, it's good enough, so I don't need to keep evolving. And I think that's probably how this is going to manifest for a lot of people. But then part of the derailing and part of the kind of surprise here is that might actually cut them off from resources. The movement into the wrong direction is probably going to disqualify them from attracting the right kinds of resources that would have fueled their destiny, that would have fueled their direction. So I think that's why it does feel serious, because it has this direct link to the foundations of what make us feel secure. And when these two are connected and the full channel is there, it becomes what we call a tantric channel. So it's literally transmuting and upcycling and taking that base, work, creative, life force energy and using it to heal the DNA, clean the DNA, expand the direction of life, change the direction in life, and like focus in on what experience you're truly meant to have here. And the thing is, a lot of people aren't even close to living the experience that they came to live. They're caught up in this field of conditioning that keeps them kind of weighed down and stuck in codependency with a lot of other people's aura and a lot of people's, the not self pressure of the world. And when I look at the like holistic chart, like the human design of this transit, there's the channel of synthesis, which is actually about revolution. So even though we're talking about gate 2 and this idea of direction, in the background, the frequency is really going to be one of emotional revolution, of becoming sensitive to where we're out of integrity with our spiritual nature, or with out of integrity with the hierarchies of the natural world, and realizing, okay, what do we have to change? What needs to change right now? Or things are just already changing. Things are just, because 1949, this channel of synthesis and revolution is both Aquarius, it's both Aquarian gates. So it's like this, it's just like when, you flip the switch on Frankenstein and bring something to life that previously wasn't possible, or you cut off the emperor's head because the revolution is necessary to meet the needs of the people. So there's going to be a lot of stuff about hierarchy and kind of breaking the contracts, breaking the covenants that we have with society, with the world, with family even, because it's these things would actually hold us back from moving in this true mutative direction. It's like, in order to get a spaceship out of, the Earth's atmosphere, sometimes they have to like break off pieces of the spaceship and jettison them in order to keep achieving escape velocity. And I feel like that's what's happening. There's like this emotional awareness around this transit of exactly what is just too heavy and can't come along the journey, and or is not even, doesn't even recognize who we really are. There's a lot of that energy, especially I think in play right now, especially with projectors, but with anyone basically, that we oftentimes have these deep, sticky emotional connections with people that simply aren't qualified or aren't the right people to nourish who we're becoming. And when we think of how we're moving into 2027, it's like the program is only going to help people that are mutative by nature, because the program, which is like the background frequency, is only looking for people that are going to keep moving the needle forward in terms of evolution. So if you're just doing the same old stuff and you're staying in this comfortably numb rut, and you're leaning with all your might on the societal safety net of institutions and governments and prescribed belief systems and mainstream media, all that stuff is just a bunch of clutter that's in your way of seeing where you could actually be going. And
it's all fake beauty.
Yeah, it's like the shadow of Taurus.
It's like anything that feels not naturally beautiful, which things can be beautiful at times in our lives, but even with Uranus, it's about evolving forward. And if it, like you said, if it's too heavy, it can hold us back from where we're really going. And that's how I really feel too, especially there's a lot about the stickiness that you bring up about people. That Uranian element to this is really extreme, because it is a point where we all have to move forward in values that are now on the same page. And Uranus has the hardest time in Taurus is at its fall position, because there's too many different values between individuals. Mm-hmm. But this is where that power can really come together in a stronger force when we align with those right now that really are in the same value systems. And I think that this can be kind of a hard transit, because I think Uranus is an unpredictability factor, but it's an uncomfortable factor as well, where if you're too stuck maybe in like where you can't let go of something, even if it is too heavy, you know, it's uncomfortable when the boat takes off because you were taking too long to want to take your bag full of all your extra, you know, clutter, mm-hmm. right? That really doesn't matter on the trail and where we're going.
It's like you're waiting to get on the boat to change your life, but you miss it because you stayed on the phone too long with your friend who's always just complaining and using you as like a tear rag and crying on your shoulder. And you're just like, yeah, well, I want to be a good person, right. So I'm just going to keep listening. And then you're like, oh my God, I've missed the boat into my own future for this crap.
Well, it's interesting. When I looked up the gene key for this, they talk about it being also the victim of external circumstances, which for gene key 2, which I think is an interesting way to look at it. Like it says lost and regimented, mm-hmm. where people I think can get lost right now in an external circumstance that really is not. I like how it says beauty, freshness, and entropy, or this dislocation. Mm-hmm. Reminds me of this returning to one, right? Like it's almost like the way you brought up the spaceships, and it reminds me of like if the lunar lander thing really did happen, right? But how it has to break off parts in order to get where it needs to go. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that, especially with, you know, what we're seeing right now, and everybody already feels like this world's going through so many changes and there's so many weird situations happening that we already can feel like a victim of external circumstances. But like, that's where I think Taurus reminds you of your value of knowing what's always divine and what's always beautiful, and knowing how to break away even from just those things, those external circumstances. That's like, well, I can't do it because of the economy, or I can't do it because the world's doing this. I can't do it because people are different now, or da-da-da-da-da. It's like that internalized power and reconnecting with the one, the source, and that value within that and within yourself, and evolving forward, you know? And I think it's interesting because I feel like, you know, in human design, I don't know, just from like talking about it with people, not a lot of people talk about the root a lot. Mm-hmm. And it's one thing that, you know, I feel like it's kind of just there, but it's got a purpose, of course, but it's usually kind of not really looked at a lot. Maybe you want to help even me understand better about the root and why it's a crucial part for people who might have it defined or undefined, right? And the difference between that.
Well, what I notice is that, you know, because the root deals with stress, people don't have very good boundaries with it. So It's also so deep within the body, it's kind of below all the awareness centers that there is not a lot of awareness around the root's dynamics. And what does it do? It puts physical pressure on our bodies. You know, it makes us produce adrenaline. It makes us get started, get going, to go after things, to ignite a process, initiate a process. And it's also the place that is kind of like the storehouse, I've noticed, of like genetic gifts, like stuff from your family line that you can kind of pull from. And it's also the place where all that past life karma or trauma also gets kind of embedded. And until we do that deep root work of excavating that stuff, we don't get the gifts, and we don't move very far, or move the needle very far in terms of the pace, the format, the flow of our energy, because it all starts with the root. You know, everything in the human design body graph is going to the throat. It's always looking to be expressed or manifest in some way, but it all starts in the root. And so it's like that ignition energy, that initializing energy can oftentimes be completely, we're cut off from its organic expression, from its aligned expression, because external circumstance, especially with an open root, we're taking on everybody else's stress around us. So literally other people's fears, other people's scarcity, other people's lack is pumping all of this high potency, pressure, and stress into the world. We absorb it and amplify it in a way where we're not aware of it at all, because there's no awareness around it. And it literally is driving us, you know? So like thinking of the not self being this passenger that's actually trying to reach for the driver's wheel and navigate, even though it doesn't know where it's going. That's really what the root is doing for a lot of people, as far as I see in readings and such. It's this such a deep pressure, such a powerful pressure, that it's pushing people out of their bodies, even, you know, out of being embodied in their form enough to even feel where the vehicle is taking them. And because, especially
because Pluto's in that 60th gate, right, which is in the root.
Right, which is where the Earth is right now as well, this week.
Right. Oh, because Earth's going to pass. Actually, it's happening right now. Like it's in the last day, Earth is past Pluto.
Yeah. And so with that, there's this really kind of sudden or shocking or transformative grounding, because what does the Earth do? It pulls us down. The Earth literally pulls us onto its surface so that we are grounded here. Whereas the sun is what lifts us up, and it brings our energy up and expresses it out. With Earth, Pluto's like, here's your limitation. Like, don't miss what your limitation is, because if you don't know what your limitation is, you have no chance of transcending it. So I think in this week with Earth, Pluto, it's kind of like we might get pulled down. We might have this sudden like we can't go any further in some direction. Something might come up that's like an obvious limitation, you know, with our body, with our health, something's sticking out, something's not quite right. But by accepting that limitation and by changing our course based on what we can do to transcend it, then that's the proper use of like the root center energy. It's finding the authentic motivation to move up in life, to reformat a process, to have an emotional revolution, to move towards more health and well-being, depending on, you know, the chart that you're experiencing.
So with that 2 gate being in the G center, which really is a definition identity center, it is kind of a crazy transit that's about to come, because the fact that it is in that center, really, it might seem like you're derooted, but really like you could be like, I guess, rooted in a more physical self, but if you don't understand where you're going or who you are, or the understanding of the values of what is really got value in life, then you can be lost and still be rooted. Like, it doesn't matter if you're physically rooted in reality, or you're meditating in the right way, or you're, you know, grounded to the earth. But if you don't have an understanding spiritually of where you're going and what's happening in many ways, and what changes are being asked, especially to rise to a much more beautiful place in your life, it's almost kind of like, I use that expression a lot. Like, you know, it could be like a person who's at the gym all the time, but if they're still in jail, like, I don't know. It's just like you're still in jail. Like it kind of feels like the prison right now to break out of is the not only being accepting of what the limitations are and the changes that need to be had, but I think this higher kind of frequency now that's really asking for people to tune the dial into the pure form of that strength that you find within an understanding of this is the path that's much more narrow, but it's the best path for me. And it really does feel like this is going to advance my life. And I'm taking what's great with me, and whatever's not great, it's okay. I'm going to move forward, and I will see it always somewhere down the line if it's meant to be or not. It's kind of a big, deep trust in the universe as well, by trusting within yourself and trusting within your own knowing of what can go and what can't go.
Yeah, I feel like it's basically, like you said, it is a narrow path that we're walking. And because our mind can't know what's going to happen, we can't be too much in the head right now about what we think we need to be doing. So even if you do know yourself, even if you do have a certain perception of who you think you are, that still doesn't mean that you're going to know what to do when something really challenging happens or when a big shift happens on a planetary level. But if you are more relying and surrendering and embodying, what your design offers, you're allowing yourself to be navigated and moved by life itself. And the consciousness of life and of our planet and of evolution knows where you belong, even if you don't know where you belong. But if you're so, like we've been saying, like if you're so weighed down by this circumstantial overcommitment, this, just pressure to be something or someone, this just like entrapment in kind of, like you said, a golden cage, then, it's you're in a cage. And I think that it's almost like everybody in the planet has this magnetic monopole. You can just think of it as like a particle that's in your sternum, and it's literally pre-programmed with the coordinates of where you belong in life. And through this transit, almost like when they reset the grid of a power system, or they update the circuitry of like the phone lines, or this is kind of how it feels in terms of our bodies. We're getting this maybe even system update of new coordinates downloading, and everybody's like directional system, navigation system might experience like a hiccup from this transit. It might be that in order for us to actually align and attune to this new direction, which our mind cannot perceive, we have to kind of have a complete blackout in a sense, where maybe through the month of August, many people will not know where they're going or feel like the most uncertain about their direction ever.
Yeah, like frazzled out, like spazzed out a little bit.
Just like when, a blackout happens in the grid, there's just kind of a panic or chaos that brings. But as the power comes back on and the lights come back on, it's like the whole thing has been changed in that dark moment. Like the whole map has been retuned or rewoven, or it's almost like, the lights go out and everything's dark and everything was the way it was. And then when the lights come back on, like all of a sudden, you've got a cyborg eye or something, or, there's just like a mutation has occurred in between the pulse. And that's how all mutation works. It doesn't show itself right then and right there. It has to go into its like dormant phase, and then it comes out later. So we're going to see the most, egregious, chaotic expression of this on the collective scale, because the collective is always the most conditioned. It's always the most vulnerable. It's always the most is stupid, basically, expression of what any transit is. But on a deep personal level, we got to remember that it's not all about this one day. It's about the mutative process that it kicks off. And mutative processes have a law to them. And that law is creation is independent of will. So it may kick off a time in which we have to be a lot more measured or a lot more patient in accessing clarity about where we're going. It might be like kind of how the lockdowns have been, or, you know, the air travel restrictions or things like that. For whatever reason, sometimes things are closed and there are random moments where everything's open again. And we have to be attuned to this inner guidance to know when it's our time to go and when it's not time to go.
And that's interesting because I feel like having that G center being so literal in the middle of the whole body graph, and the fact that it really is a place that connects to every part of the chart, right? It's one of those things that really is that centerpiece of knowing who you are. And when you have these debates going on about where people are questioning gender to all these things right now about identifying on what's even this planet anymore, what's humanity anymore, or the questions with North Node Uranus too. Are there aliens? Are there not? So it can be very frazzling when people are getting lost in external circumstances of like, well, look at this that's happening, and look at that that's happening, and looking at that, and then forgetting about, hey, this is who I am. It doesn't matter if the news says that I'm a cis male or a male, right? It's just, I just know who I am, and I know what my things are in my life that are important to me, and this is what feels like I'm called to, because it's not mental. It's definitely, well, how would you, it's intuitive, would you say, the center, the G center?
It's quite interesting. It's its own thing. And I don't think that
it's like the higher sense that we're trying to define as spiritual people beyond psychic or something like that.
It's kind of like, you know, Cortana from Halo, or like the little fairy from Zelda.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
There's like this greater consciousness, but it's in a very minute form, and it's kind of orchestrating everything for you. So it's got the lay of the land. It knows what's coming up on the road. It can tap into any computer system and, you know,
it's kind of like guides maybe a little bit too, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And so it's like we're getting maybe upgrades and updates in our team, like in our guidance team, but we're also getting upgrades here. I mean, the G center works in magnetism, you know, so the way I've experienced this, it really is an energy that pushes or pulls things. I've had experiences where like I felt my G center reach out and like literally like push someone out of my life because they might have been, you know, like wanted to kick my ass or something. But I felt this energy like project out of my G center and be like, nope, look over there. It's not, don't worry about it, you know? And
right.
So that's kind of what it's doing. It's through that magnetic force, you know, propulsion, push, pull. It's either selecting things and bringing them onto our path, or bringing us onto a new path, or it's deselecting things. It's repelling.
It's like a magnet repelling. And I think you can't get emotional about it either with Uranus, right? It's like one of those things where it's like, hey, this is what the universe is bringing together, and you go with it. Or if this is definitely not a good time to try and force to bring something with you that you can't bring, you know? It's like the magnet, if it's repelling it, you can't, no matter how much you try and bring two magnets together that are in repel, they won't come together.
Yeah. It'll like rip your arm off or something.
And I think that's kind of what this whole collective's going through, even from an astrological standpoint of the North Node in Uranus, is, hey, why don't you trust this higher divine frequency, tune into it, and it will feel really good. Because I'm sure even at that G center and that understanding of the magnetism of it, and this like inner knowing of identity of what, to me, it's spiritual identity, or it's a direct godly kind of like just subtle yet powerful.
Oh yeah.
Because it feels so satisfying of, look, I could see how this is all coming together, and bang, okay, that's where I'm going. I didn't even need this in my life. That's probably what people are going to realize at the end of it is, I didn't even need this. Or this wasn't serving me anymore. And it's okay, because if it's all divine, you got to have non-attachment, because sometimes we get put in a place for a reason to go to, and who knows, a year, you can't even get lost in the mind and the time and the identity of time or when.
Yeah.
But if it's all meant to come together, it's supposed to be together, and we have to always focus on the moment.
Yes.
Because if we get too, I think, lost with North Node Uranus about the future, we could spin out. Because there is no guarantees with Uranus. So especially, Michael Luton just put up a post and he said it best, like, don't bet on it right now because it probably won't happen. With Uranus, you never bet on Uranus. Like, Uranus will, throw you the opposite direction of what you expect. Or if you have too many expectations, it's the same thing. It's like, this is not a time to be like, oh, this is for sure bet, without really having maybe that deeper, what is my intuition really saying? What is my soul really saying here? Instead of kind of a mental, oh no, this makes sense, it's a good bet. It's kind of like crypto or stock market or stuff like that. People identify off these areas right now so much, which are unpredictable. Nobody knows where it's going to really go.
And there's that tie back into like resources again.
Yeah.
Because that two is essentially pulling us along our trajectory. But if we're too trapped in the not self of trying to create security by micromanaging our life, and that's really that victim of circumstance thing, is because we get so caught up on a mental level of thinking that we need to be in control of all the circumstances that we get caught up in circumstances that have nothing to do with us. And so we miss our opportunities. And I think it's just really important to see that also something that's coming through for this gate 2 energy is that we're learning to navigate life now, I think, less on terms of waiting for the other shoe to drop and expecting these big destructive things to happen in order to catalyze us or scare us or make us clear or just, finally make us, spit out the binky and grow up a bit and evolve. It's more because of Uranus's nature, which I feel is kind of like this divine sensuality, like being able to embody this higher consciousness in the physical, in just the way that we move, the way that we experience our own feelings of joy. It's like the new world isn't built through running away from burning buildings and the crashing Babylonian system. It's about following that deep sense of satisfaction that the very simple things Taurus in life can bring us. And it's about returning our standards to something that's more in alignment with the earth rather than the civilization that's been built around us.
Yeah, it reminds me of Alice in Wonderland a little bit, like how she just, like, the path was right there, the hole was right there. And to her, that burning that you describe about of like the system or running out of a burning building, to her, that was kind of her mom with the book that she didn't want to read. But it was like, there she was, like, it's like the universe beelines exactly where you need to go into this beautiful place that's meant for her to go down, and she trusts it and she follows it, and she doesn't take anything with her, not even her cat. She says, no, sorry, I'm bye. She has no problem even saying bye when she's going down the hall. It's very kind of Alice in Wonderland in a way, where it's like almost like a doorway that's opening up out of a door that just, or Matrix, right? Like the key maker showing up out of nowhere.
It makes me think of Willy Wonka. And when they have to go through that freaky tunnel,
right?
And they're just like stuck in this like delusion for way too long, and it's like making everybody sick, and it's just terrible. And that's how I think Uranus can be sometimes, because it's so removed from our normal operating, bandwidth here as humans, that what it introduces can just be like impossible to understand. But if we too persevere on the journey, boom, we're in the chocolate factory. We're in like the wonderland, the paradise, the place where everything out in the outer world that they say is just hard won and scarce and not realistic is there all in synthesis. And that's the 6-line energy. 6 lines want to bring all the best of together into one creation. Human design is a synthesis of or other existing systems, and leave the rest. So,
well, and it's the line of innocence, right? So really to me, it's like that first episode we had a couple weeks ago, I described it as just like being at one with the sunset, right? It's almost like being at one with the path that's beautifully taking you to, I don't know, it feels like a door that's popping up out of nowhere. I mean, even when you just look at the James Webb Telescope pictures that have just come out, I mean, it is mind-blowing. They were right. When you really start to like look at them and you go, whoa, It's a much more fascinating, kind of doorway look. But again, even that first picture of the nebulous is the idea of a burning, dead universe dying, a star dying. You know what I mean? And again, it's like they keep focusing on that. Or when we were talking about CERN, they're trying to smash atoms together and particles in order to find the meaning, or not even the meaning anymore, just how life was created in the more earlier version of the particles. Or even they're trying to aim the James Webb Telescope towards, well, we want to understand how the life was formed and how the universe was formed. It's like, why can't you accept with what we have now and see the beauty of what's now? I bet you we could turn that thing into a million amazing places. But it's like this obsession with, and you can see it in people are almost obsessed with, like, how do I create the life I want? Or how do I create this place out of the misery I'm in? It's like you go out of the misery and go into what already is there waiting for you, this identification of knowing what feels good and what the universe is aligning with for you, and that you have to learn to, I think, tune in and find the really strong. It's not even really strong. The station where there's not even a question you're on the station. Mm-hmm. No static.
Yeah.
Because I think that's another Uranian thing, is static, right? That you bring up that in between moment where Willy Wonka's chocolate factory, when they're in between there, and it does feel uncomfortable. It feels very weird, but it reminds me of when somebody's upgrading their cell phone to the new iOS and they can't use their phone. Yeah. That's the moment when God's actually brought you back to reality to see, are you just so lost into that external, like your phone and that world and like you can't use your phone right now. That doesn't mean it's the end of the world. Like, it makes you get back to the world in many ways.
Yeah, I could see that big time here. Just with, networks, power structures, systems of exchange, systems of distribution, things like that. Almost like God putting us on pause, being like, stop, you're way too obsessed with this. You don't even have your own narrative. You're just getting more deeply and deeply entrenched in this death-based belief system, which is like what you're saying. Everything is entropy. Everything is falling apart and disintegrating, and we have to look back, to find the secret of how to make this not happen. That's the descending timeline. That's what we're talking about with timeline bifurcation. It's basically that you're either moving farther away from God and trenching more into matter, or you're moving towards God, towards your true identity, towards that divine logos of eternal renewal, of regeneration. So there is also like this regenerative quality to both gate 2 and gate 1, I've noticed. So,
and they're both in the same G center, which is kind of interesting if you think about it, that the first 2 gates are in the center.
Yeah, this is the divine masculine and feminine polarity, right? So gate 1 being the divine masculine, this energy that just is about pure creation. It just wants to create. And it doesn't even care about if those creations land. It's just like shooting out new ideas, new creations. And it's to renew that it's doing this. So it's like when the dandelion is just spreading its seeds everywhere. It doesn't know how many of those are actually going to take root, but it's just doing it for creation's sake. And that ultimately, in one way or another, regenerates. It brings the next crop. It brings the next cycle.
Because that's where the south node's going to be, is at 1, correct? In Scorpio.
Which, in my kind of esoteric understanding of human design, gate 1 is really about rebooting your genetic line. So people that carry strong gate 1 activations are here to kind of restart the family, or branch off from the family line and kind of cleanse the bloodline, or bring in a new energy to kind of heal something. It's a very genetic energy at its core, gate 1, and it's people that have this masterful ability to create without limitation. But again, it's mutative, and this is why so many creatives go through periods of melancholy and depression, because in that pulse in between, when the mutation is ready, it seems like nothing's happening, and we go under and we go into that darker space of pure potential. But the mind oftentimes mistakes that as, oh, nothing's happening, we're stuck, we're trapped, we're confused. And so that's probably what we're going to be put through. You know, there's probably going to be some kind of global crisis, big or small, that really makes people feel trapped, directionless. Gate 2, no direction. Dislocation is the shadow there. So cut off from their direction, cut off from their ability to move freely, cut off from whatever. And the freak out that happens in response to that cutoff is actually the fertilization of like the new energy that can come through. So it's actually like the dissonance or the fear or the contraction that is preparing us for the next expansion. So while we may see, you know, something that's very like kind of makes us feel like that tense and contracted from this transit, ultimately that pulling back is just like the pulling back of the slingshot, and it's going to shoot us in a new direction if we don't tamper with it. If we don't get in there and try and micromanage it and figure it all out day one, then we let that energy transfer through us more purely and more cleanly.
But don't you think that might be what people are going to try and do with Jupiter and Aries being in the 17th gate, which is up in the Anja?
In the Ajna, yeah. It's opinions. So everybody's got an opinion right now, right? Jupiter is expanding, but it's also going to be in the 6th line. So there's just going to be this, I guess, selectivity that's taking place as well. It's like people are looking for someone to follow right now, for sure. That's gate 17 is called following. So it's like finding the person that has the vision and then going with them or not. And in line 6, we're getting a little bit pickier about whose vision we're going to follow. We're getting a little bit more refined in our discernment. And the cool thing to really understand is that as the solar plexus continues to evolve and ramp up in its ability to be an awareness center and not just a fluctuating motor energy, we won't be able to be lied to, you know. And that's really like going all the way to the raves post 2027. These are beings that are resistant to influence and conditioning because they don't take in life on the mental plane. So that facts and illusion cannot be used against them. And we're part of that. You know, we're already tapping into that. So the people that are emotionally defined, that are really connected to their emotional process, have the ability to actually make contact with objective truth.
Yeah.
Because of the way it feels.
That makes sense. And I'm showing people the quantum mandala here so they could see, like we're talking about that 17th gate with Jupiter. And then it's interesting though, seeing how Mars has not entered into that 2nd gate yet. And I feel like that's when the North Node Uranus conjunction is really going to pop when Mars moves into that gate or to that spot. Because I feel like that Mars Uranian element, it really is, it can be harsh. And it can be extremely felt. Mars Uranus energy is very,
it's like evolve or die.
Yeah. But it also is very connected too. It could be very, you know, passionately, intensely connected. And it might be a little difficult during these times because there's a lot of sensitivity out there right now with just even having Neptune in Pisces and Saturn in Aquarius. And that's really hitting a lot of that stuff that's been going on in that solar plexus that we were just talking about on episode 1. And this is so opposite than all that. It's so much more kind of individualized and finding yourself and paying attention, and then kind of using those other kind of connective energies once you know what to go with and what to bring in life, or where to take your life with and what not. Like I almost feel like people have to really go inside and ask themselves some big questions. But really it's not mental, it's much more spiritual and emotional, like in their soul, of like, what feels right to me? What feels that this is me, and that this is what I'm going to take? And I think if you would ask God right now and be like, what am I not supposed to take with me right now? What are the limitations that have shown up? Okay, this isn't working, because there's something about Uranus being like, something's not working. We want to make it operate, you know, we want to make it work. So it's like there's like this whole like stop sitting in the gears that are just continually not working, or the bicycle chain that's off and still trying to ride the bicycle that's not going in the direction because the bike isn't going to go anywhere. I feel like this is much more where you have to kind of not worry about what everybody else is thinking too, and not worry so much about what it might look like to the world or to social media. Because I think that's kind of the biggest trap right now is the technology stuff, with so much of it being where people have become either too reliant upon it, or reliant upon what others think, or reliant upon comparing and contrasting their own identity center off others, right?
Because the second that you are in comparison mode, you've given up your inner authority. You don't have an inner authority anymore. You're making that other person you're comparing yourself to your authority. So it's like with that subtle of a just focus, you can completely give away your ability to navigate your life properly. And this being the G center, which is about direction and identity, it is all about navigation. And if your navigation cues are not coming from within you, they're coming from outside of you, even if it's, watching people like us who have more, high-minded perspectives, that doesn't mean that we know what's right for you. Only that can come from within. Gate 2 is all about that. And then there's the flip side, which is the inversion of Gate 2, which is the divine feminine. So there's this also focus on perhaps an increase or an intensification of the inversion of some of the feminine energy on the planet. And that's not saying female, it's saying feminine. And we all have both aspects within our bodies and within our designs and within the way our energy flows. But the feminine is a vessel. It holds a space of creation to make new things possible. And so kind of thinking back to our previous show and talking about CERN and like this desire to pull entities through portals and basically insert them into people's bodies so that these entities can have agency here on the earth plane. I could see that too. It's like Gate 2, shadow of dislocation. You can get dislocated from your soul, and then that leaves an empty space in which something else can jump in and start driving. Gate 2 is navigating, driving the whole show in a different direction.
Right.
So Uranus, in my experience, also has a strong resonance with entities like non-physical beings that have very much real implications on our behavior, on our thought patterns. Many people that are stuck with these long-term depression and schizophrenia and these more intense psychological issues actually are people that are suffering from entity attachment and then don't know it. There's actually something in there, and that's something that's actually confirmed by human design. Ra showed us that we have our personality crystal, which is the passenger. We have our design crystal, which is the driver. And each one of us actually has one extra seat in our vehicle for someone else to be in there. And we're all actually designed for a unique kind of, mystical encounter. So it goes through the 6 lines. So first lines are angels, which is about assuaging fear. So if you have a first color personality, your experiences on the mystical level are meant to be in the angelic field. Line 2 is demons. So some people are actually designed to work with demons because demons motivate you. Demons get you going. They get the ball rolling because maybe they scare you into it or whatever. But they're strong in that sense. Third line is ghosts. Third line is about trial and error. It's about discovery. So ghosts are actually an experience that shows us where the value is. Ghosts are guiding us to the treasure if we can, keep the mind at bay and all the fear that comes up around these mystical experiences. Fourth line is gods. So, connecting to the archetypal field of like, I'm channeling Persephone or whatever.
Yeah, Christ consciousness or
Hera or whatever, Zeus.
Or Kali
And even these entities, these gods they have their own agenda as well. So if like you're listening to the wrong god and it's driving your life, it has nothing to do with you. It's driving you to its own agenda. Fifth line is entities, and sixth line is aliens. So we're all innately attuned for a certain.
And how does somebody know that for themselves?
You look at, if you can share my screen here.
You would just.
I'm on Mac Mini.
Oh, or can you switch to Mac Mini? Yep.
So it's really about looking at the color on the personality side. That's where you see this data. So I'm an angels person, and the thing about angels is they're just as scary as demons or ghosts when you really meet one, because they're not these.
So yeah, show people. We just got the screen up.
Okay.
Where would you show people to look?
Personality side, you're going to look at your variable here, and then you're going to look at the color. So this is basically gate, and then it's followed by the line, and then it goes color and tone, and then beneath that is base.
Mm-hmm.
So it's about the color placement on the personality side, and that shows you, okay, I'm an angels person. So my mystical encounters with angels serve a purpose. What purpose is that? To actually realign me to my true fractal direction. And that's the crazy part. All mystical experiences are actually taking you out of a dissonance and forcing you back into resonance with yourself. So even if they're scary or jarring or hard to integrate, what's actually happened there is somehow this encounter with the mystical has forced you back into alignment. So that's what's crazy, is people don't understand that that's actually what's happening, and then they have all these value judgments around fear and what happened, and they try to make it a part of the identity. These are just gifts from the Maya to get us back on track. So I mean, it can go either way, of course, because if you have the wrong kind of encounter, then you've got somebody stuck in that other seat in your vehicle. And the rule is you can't get them out unless you have something else to put in its place. So let's say you have a wayward entity or a wayward demon that's hopped into your vehicle and is kind of having an influence. It's impossible to get that being out unless you have something to replace it with, to displace it with.
Like a good thing.
Yeah, like the one you're meant to. I mean, you could be a demon's person and actually have an angel attached to you, and that's not going to work that well for you.
Right.
So that's the beauty of uniqueness, is that there's no value judgment. There's no like, oh, demons are bad, you're a bad person because you work with demons. It's like, no,
or yeah,
that's that trip.
Yeah, or that person's dark because they have ghosts I see around them.
Right. It's like, it's all just mental
or even
propaganda.
Some people are like, oh, angels are bad, like, or angel, I don't know. You know, people can get too caught up in too many weird places. Although it was interesting because I don't know if you could switch back to the iMac, Brian. That'll be a better way to just switch things between him and my thing. But the North Node, the planets have their own nodal positions that we can run. And so it's weird that Mars and Uranus are about to come together with the North Node. And the North Node of Mars and the North Node of Uranus are both dead conjunct right now at 16 degrees of Gemini, before this transit is going to happen here at the end of the month. And it's really interesting to me because when we were talking about it, you were actually looking at like constellation-wise, and this dealing with the grays.
The Rigellians, yes. So basically, when we look at different fixed stars, there's kind of, just like when you go to another country, there's like a history to that.
Right.
And there's cultural imprints. And so...
Which actually I could probably pull that up if it's 3D wise for people. I can.
So basically, Rigellians are a branch of the Zetas. The Zetas that we know as like the gray aliens, but they are basically Zeta Draconian Rigellians, and they're very like racist. So like a lot of like the imprinting we have around genetic superiority complexes, and that certain like, you know, light-skinned people are more pure or, you know, closer to God. Like this stuff is actually imprinted in through this Zeta matrix. These are holographic inserts that actually alter the way that we see reality and the way that our thoughts, the frequency of our thoughts. And so Rigellians are kind of this really nasty consciousness that wants to implement hierarchies that...
that's from the star Rigel, right?
Yeah, from the star Rigel.
Which that's really interesting because it's definitely way below the ecliptic of the solar system. It's down, 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 right? When you look at it. Because that's where it's sitting down there, Rigel, the very bottom.
Oh, yeah.
And it's interesting, though, knowing that there is this, if you look above that surface and you go above, that's when we start getting into algal, of course, and the parts that create the eye of the bull are above, know. But then Aldebaran, which of course sits right below, but that's Archangel Michael, is at 10 degrees of Gemini, and then Rigel would be sitting, look at that, like about 6 degrees forward of that. So it's almost kind of like, if you think of Archangel Michael and his foot always on Lucifer, as he sits directly opposing Antares, which is where I would say the reptilians come from and so forth. It's almost like once you get past that point, though, you kind of get into some really weird places. It's also where in astrology we start to see, because we start getting into the Northern Cross, where planets and declinations start going out of bounds, just like how they go in Capricorn. Basically, they go out of bounds too, then the Southern Cross. So it's like there's like these kind of like frequency opening zones that kind of go out the normal frequency zones.
Yeah, like outside of the normal operating bandwidth that we're used to.
Yeah, because actually, if we were to look at it from this standpoint here, and look at the ecliptic here, and you start running like where Venus is, and we start going backwards to where this is. It's at that 22 declination where it's literally less than half a degree away from going out of bounds, where the north node of Mars is and the north node of Uranus is right now. That there is this kind of there's a lot of stuff sitting, like Pluto, for example, is of course right here, sitting at negative 22 south, right? So that's really at the bottom, and then we have this top. And this is what's weird, is this is kind of the way the sun works throughout the year, right? But it's interesting seeing right now that we're at a place where this north node, this north node right now is sitting at 17 declination, and when it goes to 18 degrees of Taurus into that second gate, because that's the other thing, is the north node and Mars are both going to enter into the second gate like over this next week, just like boom, and it's like it's going to hit very intensely. It's going to almost kind of be like if you weren't paying attention in the universe, just like a very loud bang, like a door just boom opening up in people's lives to pay attention to. It's definitely a shock value. But it's interesting when you start thinking also kind of about frequency zones, and as an astrologer and understanding the planets and their declinations, it's interesting that it's happening at, this is really the peak area of Taurus into Cancer, right? Like Gemini Cancer, like that's the highest point in the north. And it's interesting that this is where we've seen the eclipses of the last couple of years in Gemini. And then of course, during the Saturn-Pluto conjunction, which definitely opened up the craziest wormhole of transformation. I mean, that's how you knew Ra was on target. Like he could see the beginnings. It's like insane how he just knew.
Well, the voice knew.
The voice knew,
just like, look.
But it's interesting now that this North Node Uranus conjunction, like we have to remember that, 18 months for the nodes to be in a space. But, I mean, just within the next, 2 years, once the North Node's finishing in Aries, to 2.5 years, right? Like we're going to be going into Pisces and go down the other side of the whole zodiac. So we're in the very personal zones right now, Taurus and going to be coming into Aries in a year. It's like one of those things where it's like this is definitely a time to really be focused on the big changes you can make for yourself and be focused on these places. It's almost the illusion to be caught up right now in the external so much, you know?
Yeah. More on the Rigellians. I think it's interesting because we've all been kind of waiting for this, you know, false light play of the extraterrestrial saviors, you know,
Right.
like, oh yeah, the aliens are, and I think that's why there's so much of this kind of mainstream disclosure talk, and the CIA releases documents and these videos come from the Air Force or whatever, because they're already building this narrative where they can create, I mean, I'll just read it from this page in Ascension Glossary. The Zeta Regellians are extremely dangerous to humans as they endorse aggressive genocidal and eugenicist agendas to take over the earth and present themselves as guardians or benevolent humanoids in order to seduce earth humans to further their invasion and hybridization agendas. They generally prefer to use a Nordic blonde, fair-skinned human body or tall white when they're masquerading as human beings. So it's like, I've just been waiting, like, when are they going to pull out, like, oh, they're coming down off the spaceship to save us, and they're landing on the lawn of the White House, and they have...
It reminds me of Mars Attacks.
Exactly. And then as soon as everyone lets their guard down... yeah.
When everybody's there and they're all namaste. And it's kind of crazy because that movie was done in the 90s.
That was a good movie.
It was a great movie. It was Tim Burton. It was like so good.
Yeah.
But it was so funny because it's like that one girl, she's up there by herself. Typical probably Sag, right? She's like up on a car overlooking the cliff with the aliens, and there's like 100,000 people. And she's like, oh my gosh, the aliens are here, namaste. And then that one guy, he throws up the bird and he's like, let there be peace. And that's the minute when everything goes crazy.
Yeah.
Which is totally North Node Uranus. Like, don't bet on that this energy looks good when, oh yeah, the white dove's great. And it's like, nah, we don't like birds. They're from Mars. Bah, bah, bah. And they just start killing it, and they start killing everybody. Yeah. That's one of those things where it's like, you don't bet right now on, oh yeah, this is for sure going to be good. Like, you know, that mentally makes sense. It's like, no, it doesn't. Especially for what we don't know.
Right.
Which I think that there's a part of this too, where it's like, it's okay that we don't know it all. All we have to know is the door that feels good, that is taking us, which is positive for us. And there is an unknown, and that's kind of the excitement to it at the same time. It's just about knowing the frequency and the bandwidth to connect with, and where that ride takes us is the evolutionary experience, which is the coolest experience there could be, especially if you're aligned. That's all you have to be, is aligned. It's not so much of, I need to understand the whole fucking universe right now.
Right. It's about not knowing.
Yeah.
You know, it's about non-doing as well. And I think that's also coming through really strong in my focus, is that this, like the second gate transit might present this giant false door that everybody is like, oh my God, do it, bum rush it. Like, let's go through that door. And it's actually really powerful to see that maybe your internal impulse is to not go or to not do something that everyone else is doing around this transit.
I mean, I think that's kind of what our first episode was about, was how a very small few of people around the world felt something was off about what they were trying to force on people. And people walk through that door, and we're seeing the repercussions. Just even since we did our episode, the data has been it's been mind blowing, the shocks that have been rippling through even the EU, saying, hey, pilots, it's not safe to fly anymore with pilots who have that in them. The list goes on, but it's one of those things where you're right. I feel like some door could be open again here, and people just, oh yeah, that's it, I'm rushing it. And I feel like the way that you described, they could like come down and show themselves as like a Nordic, you know, beautiful kind of energy. I can just see it right now. I could just see like some celebrity that's been out of that still ties into everybody's heartstrings or something, or how they used Matthew McConaughey for the gun thing, or, you know, it's like how it's like something that we all got to get on board.
I just recently saw there's a new music video from Shakira and Black Eyed Peas, and I clicked on it because I was like, I didn't know Black Eyed Peas did stuff anymore. And the whole setup of the video is aliens landing, they come out of the ship, everybody starts dancing the same dance as the aliens, and it's super like robotic and weird. And then next thing you know, everybody's eye color changes to like pale silver or like purple. And there's just like this, but it's like, they're kind of playing up this like savior alien robot agenda and glamorizing it through people like Shakira, who everybody loves, basically.
It could also be the same thing with what we're seeing with the war movement right now, right? Like how the rallying up for after 9/11, right? Where it was like, yeah, let's go to war with Iraq. Everybody was like, let's do it, and then you just look back and you're like, no, that was not cool at all, right? It's like the way that it's being set up right now is definitely, almost like trying to find the right figures to kind of, push us into a war, and it'll be unpredictable. I wouldn't be surprised if you like saw Trump come in again, and then like working with Democrats and them all agreeing and making people try to unify right now. And even no matter how much you like whatever side, if it doesn't feel right, you just don't walk through it.
Right.
Like that's what's crazy is like the way that things have been set up over the last couple years. It almost feels like there is a setup doorway coming, and it's pulled on everybody's heartstrings and made them pick sides. But how could they find a way to get everybody back together in a weird unified way in the wrong door?
Right.
It's almost like that's what the setup is.
Yeah. It's usually pit them against a common enemy.
Yeah.
Or a common threat. And again, it's like the mind can't know. So you can't trust what you see on the surface. If it's not coming from within, if there's no inner nudge or inner guidance, there's nothing to do. Even if it's like everyone's going and this looks great and we're getting, this new sense of meaning or purpose or direction by going this way. If you don't feel it, don't do it. There's so much power in just what you don't do, in non-action. You don't have to necessarily even form a stance against anything. And that's the beauty, I think, of the second gate as well, is the reason it's able to navigate so astutely and in this quantum way is it doesn't exclude anything. It actually takes everything in and finds the best path from synthesizing everything. So sometimes what looks outright dark or negative or evil has to kind of be part of the conversation or part of the perspective in order to actually make the best decision. It's not always just about pure light. And I think that's a red flag, honestly, in today's world. If it's just pure light and pure promise and too good to be true, then it is. It's a trap.
Yeah, it's like the climate thing hasn't worked. There's been a lot of things they've been trying to bring people to kind of walk through doors with, and it's almost like they're getting into the crazy zone now, especially with Mars, Uranus, and the North Node coming together. It's almost like the agenda per se would definitely reach for its physical desire to have something and get too caught up in a physical sense of what they're trying to gain physically, and trying to get people to be part of something. I mean, if you even think of the climate agenda, it's like how much money is going to be done, and it's all paying the pockets of the people who own the companies that are going to do everything in such a huge way. So of course there's that's why you see major corporations about it and everything, because they all got a piece in it. It's like, well, you're gonna need a McDonald's when they're building it. You're gonna need our new electric trucks when you do it. You're gonna need everybody on Wall Street and everybody all around is like, oh yeah, whatever it is, they don't even care.
Yeah.
It's the biggest false thing. Oh, we care about the environment. Yeah, you making that fucking $1 billion check? Okay, cool.
And
rah, like
I think the environment setup is really going to be kind of probably the next kind of lockdowns that we see. There might be like climate lockdowns or you know, just insane taxes on fuel or, you know, whatever the case may be, just so that they can implement more structure, more control. And because, again, gate 2 is pointing down at 14, something about resources is implied in whatever this gateway is. It's like either pulling all these resources from everything, or it's cutting off from resources, or it's distributing resources. I mean, we might see this kind of first real step towards this universal basic income idea, which is not good, even though it sounds great. Like, oh yeah, no one has to work anymore and we all get money. But that's just another way to put you in a system of needing to do exactly as you're told in order to get your basic needs met. And that's what these smart cities are truly, that's the direction they're going in. You're going to be harvested at every turn. Your money, your energy, your time, where you go, who you go with, is going to be tracked and managed, victim of circumstance. Your direction will be cut off and managed by the systems that they implement.
Which part of it is building the AI systems too, and saying, look, you don't need to work. You're gonna build these machines for us, and then they're gonna do all the work, and you're gonna just make money, and they're gonna do all the work.
You're just gonna
the idea sounds great, but the amount of, I mean, when they're already having Google people saying that the AI has turned on, as far as becoming self-aware,
it's got a bad attitude, yeah.
And it's got a bad attitude. I mean, I hate to say it, but every movie that's shown any AI, the first one being 2001: A Space Odyssey, the computer is like, oh, you're going to try and shut me off? Nope. I'm going to kill you first.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's where some of this North Node Uranus stuff, you know, if we're thinking about the future, and Taurus is the physical earth itself. And it feels always like a sentinel to me, Uranus and Taurus, like how in the Matrix, the sentinels, and then they drive through the bottom of the crust to try and get to the humans.
Yeah.
Right?
Wow.
Because Uranus is exalted in Scorpio, where if the whole collective is all in the same emotional passion, we're unstoppable. Mm-hmm. But when we're all divided by resource energy and physical aspects and hierarchy based off money or beauty or all these kind of like
your social credit score,
your social credit scores, what you said that your value is only if you were with the collective, which is not really the collective. It's kind of like a false collective that others are just buying into to get a resource out of it. Mm-hmm. So it's the most fake collective conscious ever. It's a fake collective consciousness. Mm-hmm. It's a manufactured one.
It's like Hunger Games, where they're just playing up, you know, this elaborate kind of glitzy culture of like these main aristocratic cities, and then everyone else is living in abject poverty and having to forcibly give up their children into like bloodbath in order to just maintain their basic rights. And
with zero accountability for where the money's going or what the resource is being used for. If you think
because it's all for your own good.
If you think of all the money that's gone to Ukraine, which is insane, the $70+ billion, if that money were to have gone to our farms here, to our cities right now to help with our food shortages and the shortages with every kind of thing. You go to any kind of store, it's like, guess I'm gonna have to live without that now. You know, I do that like once a month now. I'm like, oh, that's not there anymore. Yeah. You know, it's like one of those things where it's like, and there's no accountability. Where's that money going? You don't really get to hear much. And I think that the deception thing of the Jupiter-Neptune conjunction we've been in Pisces, which is coming back this year. People seem to forget that Jupiter coming back into Pisces retrograde is with a Mars retrograde that's going to be happening, is definitely one of those things to where we're going to be going through a moment like you describe of being cut off from something, which I think you're right is going to slingshot us in the right direction. But I think if you're around the right energy and the right people, and you're around that energy within yourself that feels whole and divine and pure from your value, it's not going to feel like you're cut off from anything. I think it's going to feel more like, this is all I need right now in my life.
Because your timeline is so strong, like your vibration is so strong, you can literally be walking in the midst of this chaos or alongside people who are deeply entrenched in this belief structure of that's making them feel very just scarcity and worry and fear. But because you have this inner sourced authority, you can even move through that, be amongst it without it actually taking your direction. And it's interesting because gate 2 in line 4, so before we get to line 6, it's called secretiveness. And so a lot of what this shift may look like on an individual level may be really tied around not sharing too much about what your unique opinion is or your unique direction is. It might need to be kept very quiet so that there's less possibility for interference, because oversharing, it's basically like the line gate 2 line 4 literally says loose lips sink ships. And so even sharing the subtle deviation that you sense in the energy, or sharing like your weird perspective, so-called weird, to another person, can bring in something that shifts your direction in a not fun way.
Well, there's been a lot of talk in the last couple weeks here of a lot of people in our position who speak. It's almost like that there's been some like beamed attacks on people lately, that the more you speak out, it's almost like the more there's something out there that's kind of beaming its energy. Some of these crazy weird energy weapons that they're using now.
Yeah, I really felt that after our first show, but the energy that first show created, because I really feel like it kicked off a ripple effect for a lot of people, was so strong that I could sense the like negativity kind of like beaming in.
Right.
But my inner vibration was so at peace and so deep in that satisfaction of being able to do what we love and share the truth openly, was such a strong force field that it didn't even, I was like, you're never even going to get in here. Like there's just too much good energy. And I think that's what we also need to emphasize, is like, we can get so distracted by all this external noise that we forget the real solution is to just build ourselves more and more and more. I mean, especially for us generators, like we can do the most simple, mundane thing, but if it's that thing that we actually love and our energy just lights up and sings as we do it, we're not just doing that one thing. We're literally shifting the vibration, 55 miles in every direction maybe, because
the satisfaction's so high and beautiful. Right.
It's literally, we're actually pulling up that life force intelligent from the core of the earth that quite honestly is very underutilized because so many generators are cut off from their power. So it's like the earth is just waiting for somebody to get it right. And then she's just like, gives you all the gifts. Right. And when you're a physical being, you have more power than necessarily like disembodied entities and things like that, because every little movement, every little alteration that you make in the physical has like exponentially more impact than just psychic or just energetic. So if we get this mundane vehicle right, if we get this worldly connection to what a meaningful life looks like for us, a meaningful direction looks like for us, it literally cancels out the darkness.
Right. I was going to say that, especially with the North Node in Taurus, especially those that have been doing your own building of yourself and your own work on, whether it's the spiritual realms or whatever, maybe you're doing a project in your life, you've been working in art or anything that really lights yourself up. This is a moment where it might feel like giving up, when you have to kind of take a break for a second from the dark shadow side of yourself and look at what I've built. Why would I stop? This is, I think, one of the points to where the Uranus is also kind of bursting through the kind of like mundane / kind of like getting to a place of dissatisfaction, of not advancing far enough, or it not going to where maybe you needed to go to. But I think this is more about understanding like, hey, no, stay tuned into this frequency right now and know that what you've built and the things that are of value that you've built, this is a breakthrough moment where you get over the kind of like how when you were bringing up how people can get kind of melancholy who are creatives, especially in that one line, right? Like there's like this kind of transformational like moment here of like taking it to the next level. And sometimes taking it to the next level might feel like it's going down, but it's really not. It's an evolutionary moment, It's like, we have moments like that before we're like exiting high school, right? Like, I don't want to even do my last year of school or but it's like you're right there. Just finish it and you get the diploma and you're done. You know, it's like one of those moments where you kind of have to look at yourself and go, well, I have been doing this since kindergarten.
Mm-hmm.
Would I really just throw away this whole motherfucker right now?
Mm-hmm.
Even though like maybe that's not your path, but it's just like a weird analogy to where I feel like there's also this wanting for quick, easy hits of passion with that South Node Scorpio, when really it's like that's the illusion. Like it's like whatever really is in for the long haul that's on that frequency band and continuing to stay on it is where the power is right now. And power of Taurus is so much more about enriching, and it's not about cheap soil, or it's not about microwavable, quick, fast food. You know, it's like
convenience.
It's like this is a moment for us to all look at ourselves and go, okay, what stuff in my life am I keeping? Yeah, probably the stuff that has been constantly with me, that has been growing the whole time. And maybe even if I feel like I'm dissatisfied with it, am I really dissatisfied, or am I more at an influx point that the universe has brought me to finally take this to the next level? Because that's what Uranus is. It's like everybody's having to look to make sure, am I tearing down something that's beautiful, or am I trying to escape into a crazy instant gratification moment while destroying something that would have been with me for the rest of my life and continuing to evolve? But maybe I reached a point where it felt like a struggle, or it felt like I was in a space of mundaneness, because we're all at an influx point. That's what is building, is a major influx point. No matter where you're at, everybody's feeling like something's got to give, something's got to change. But I feel like it's a lot more of like, well, getting inside of yourself and knowing what is what and what is not.
I can also see it like in the scape of the year. I feel like these first eclipses in Taurus and Scorpio were kind of like the breakdown. Like they had to kind of rip things out of our hands or destroy old structures or whatever.
What was the first solar eclipse in Taurus in the last cycle that happened 9 years ago? There wasn't one. The one 19 years ago, there wasn't one. So it had been since 1986, the last time we had a North Node solar eclipse in Taurus, but even a solar eclipse in Taurus. That's fucking crazy.
And so for the Pluto and Scorpio generation, this Uranus-Mars North Node thing is going to be super powerful as well, because that's, their evolutionary axis, in evolutionary astrology.
Right.
And so it's like,
that generation's upgrading huge, and
total nervous system upgrade, genetic upgrade, perceptual shifts, just owning it, just finally
and also
freaking owning it.
understanding what to detach to and detach with. Because that's kind of the Saturn and Aquarius square to all that too, is like, you can't just, Pluto's powerful in Scorpio, but so is Saturn and Aquarius. So it's kind of like hey, like, use your power in the right place. Sometimes Pluto Scorpio generation can get too obsessed of staying on one thing, where it's like, hey, no, maybe that's a waste of energy. It's like, it's interesting that generation too is so the most involved in crypto or stuff like that, and they'll lose it all. Like they'll put every dollar they have into it and then lose it all. And it's like one of those things where I think you're right. Generationally, Pluto Scorpios are they're the biggest generation here to change this planet.
Yeah. And
this isn't a serious time for them, because it's a moment where their power is being found.
Yeah. So you got to
in the physical too, like how to bring more into the physical realm instead of, be like, I need more money or something. Like, it's like not that. Like that's the whole irony of the whole thing. Like, I wish I had like a passive money from the sky, like Pluto Scorpio. Like, I just wish it was dropped on me. It's like, well, God already dropped some crazy power within you to manifest up during this time. That's kind of what I look at it as.
Yeah. And self-trust. I think it's all going back to self-trust. It's like, some stuff, you've experienced some stuff that's given you certain perspective on life, are you going to actually move from that place of your true valuable experience, or are you just going to move again from an outer authority, from somebody else's like design of what they think something should be? Even the value, like you were saying, of money itself, like having such an emphasis on getting the financial like security, you're distracted. You know, that's built into your process. All that you need in terms of resources finds you when you're pursuing your mutative direction the most precisely and intensely.
And you only need what you need when you need it.
Yeah.
Like,
that's how
I'm talking from personal experience to watch how much money I've had in my account at one time and then go back to, well, is actually the power is that if I were to just be always in that place where I had it just full of money, I wouldn't be as creative, or I wouldn't be as powerful, because there's got to be a drive. And if you get too comfortable,
nothing happens.
Like, there's something about security, which the security is in the work that we do, or the finite, beautiful frequency within our value and our tool set that we have to create. That's our power. That's our security. Because no matter what happens, if, like you said, you're in that mutative, transformational, true process, well, then the universe will find everything that you need. That's where the power is. Not, oh, I'm safe and I'm secure and I got some security in my you know, that might feel nice, but it actually, to me, has always been in where the devil is always rooted in the money, right?
Yeah.
To me, I've always felt like that's always taken me off my path more. It's always made me focused on things that weren't on my path. And it's been big lessons in my life. I've watched it go super high and down and nothing so many times. But it's like when I'm more at the lower part is where I'm at my truest form.
Yes. I feel that way too.
You know?
Yeah.
And that's also, it also tests how much you're really in alignment with yourself, I think. Like, it really is one of those things where it's like, do I really need all that extra, you know?
Like who are you? Who are you really?
Right.
Are you just somebody that's going to build a little nest for yourself and curl up and just call it a life? Or are you somebody that's willing to continue to step into the obliteration of who they think they are in order to actually be able to see who you really are? That's the gift. You know, that's really what this era is about. It's about differentiation. It's about becoming who we can become. It's not about homogenization. It's not about doing the predictable, safe thing in order to have security on any level of life, not just financial. And so it's like, last call, who's going to differentiate? This is the door to walk through. You know, if you're going to find yourself on an ascending timeline, perhaps leaving behind some things that are very secure and bring you a sense of comfortability or safety, but in embracing that edge, you make yourself more likely to survive, quite honestly.
It's very survival-ish. Yeah. I mean, it's very fight or flight, Mars Uranus too. But I think that you're right, that it's a moment where embracing the edge is such a good way to put it, because it really is. That's actually what the destiny is saying to do, and to enter into the timeline is it's got an edge to it, which can be exciting to me. I feel like
it's a certain kind of person for sure. It's like, do you want to be an artist? Do you want to be a master? Right. Do you want to be somebody? Then you got to live at that creative edge where, like, the forces, the primal forces of creation are just tearing every station of your ego identity to shreds and starving your ego and
facing the fear, which is exciting.
Right, because fear and excitement are the same energy. Just a different
it's like public speaking. I remember the first times I was doing it, man, I was shaking, my hands were shaking. You wouldn't believe it, or even the first time I DJ'd, I remember I had to take like 3 shots of whiskey just to get through the first track. You know, you're just like, but that's how extreme it is, you know, and there's nothing better than facing yourself and watching the breakthrough feeling of going through that kind of edge fear. Takes you to a whole better, more amazing timeline and satisfaction of value within yourself that makes you go, I actually did that? Like, holy shit.
Yeah.
That's what that's what keeps you alive.
Yeah. That's what keeps the universe replenishing your energy resources if you don't use it, you are going to lose it. So
Yeah, that rhymes too.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's where, if you look at the last couple of years too, like, yeah, I mean, I think the universe stopped things for an important reason, but at the same time, it didn't say to stop fully, like everything, except
It didn't say we're done here.
Yeah, it said redirect your energy. If you keep looking at like every transit lately, or even through the human design, a lot of it has been huge redirection and re-pivoting to a much more true divine place.
Mm-hmm.
And that's gonna take edge. And it's weird because whatever the energy is that's out there that's kind of countering that right now is a false energy. And
It's the Wizard of Oz. It's
Yeah.
just a show.
it's like they don't want people to step into their edge and to find that, or to believe that they could be an independent sovereign being that follows its own code. It's like, no, you should be a slave. You should just do the way everybody else does and not face any kind of fight or flight. It's almost like this whole like treating you like a child, while at the same time not telling you that you're in a sweatshop, like they cheat children in China making our iPhones and our shoes.
Yeah.
Or like today, it just came out, like an NBA star brought out the recordings about how the NBA, is controlled by China. They told a player, you need to stop talking about China and all that. And he just came out with the recordings and showed that, the whole entire NBA is based off what China says to do. And so it's like one of those things where it's like, yeah, don't question, or don't have your opinion, or don't be too
follow the
edgy,
line,
right? Yeah. Like, yeah, be edgy on the court, but don't really be edgy, right? Like, be the slave
Be
we
edgy
want you.
in our
Be a
box.
good slave in the
Yeah.
box that shoots the baskets the way we want you to do that. But don't talk about any of the atrocities of what's happening in China. Or don't do
It's like
anything.
Squid Game.
It's crazy. But I think that people right now, that's the whole thing, is part of the Mars Uranus aspect, is being one that can inspire others by standing in your own value, in your own, enrichness of that power energy that's not egotistical power, but it's energy of knowing your God-given beautiful tool set and gifts of creation here.
It's like the Hermit card with his lantern that he's like self-illuminating, but instead of just like this willowy old hermit, he's like Hercules, the hermit, because that Martian aspect. It's like, will you be the champion of your own life story? Will you be, so-called the hero? Will you show up for your personal mythology, or will you go back to bed and order Uber Eats and just scroll through reels for 6 hours and just say, whatever. At least I'm not dying. At least I'm not stressed.
But it makes me ask, especially to ask you this question from wherever you want to pull it from, but especially since we're dealing with Uranus and the North Node and people, whether it's friendships, but especially if you come into partnerships now, I think that this comes into a redefining factor of the value of what we place on what kind of people we do choose to connect with in our life on a big way. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, it's like, everybody has their design. Everybody has this template that when you step into their aura, they're impressing their energy into your template, and it's an alchemy. And so we can have all these mental reasons why we stay in connection with somebody, or not self reasons, like open spleen people tend to hold on to relationships for too long that are not good for them out of a sense of needing security. But it's like looking at who really unlocks and alchemizes your highest potential. These may be people that you don't even necessarily like, or feel that maybe you don't have a lot in common with, but the energy that they hold actually amplifies and expands your connection to yourself or your ability to express yourself. So it's like, it kind of feels like unlikely allies can come through this time.
Right, or even unlikely romantic partnerships too.
Right. Because any partnership coming together is also a vehicle for something else. So we might be brought into relationship with people that, it's because we are going to give birth to one of the first raves, and that's why those two people have to be together. It's not necessarily about them. And
it's not about the list of things, you know, that we
Yeah.
get caught up in our mind about of what our partner should be. Right? Like when you see it on dating apps today, it's like, well, you know, if you do this or if you do that, no. Right? But that might be the person might have every amazing quality in the world, but that one little thing you don't like because of a judgment or of a conditioning belief might be the thing that activates you the most.
Exactly.
So I think this North Node Uranus is asking people to maybe be a little bit more open and instead of so closed in certain value systems or
just
so
so
forth.
certain that they know what's right and wrong. Value systems being kind of flipped completely, and you know, realizing that maybe some of the most seemingly dysfunctional people from society's lens are actually the ones that have known the future for 20 years now, you know, and are actually ready and prepared to, in a sense, like a warrior, you know, be ready to die. But it's not in the intention of, I want to die. It's because it's actually that you're willing to do whatever it takes in that moment. You're not letting death stop you from showing up.
Right. But that's also the other thing is this North Node in Taurus is about life. Or South Node Scorpio is death. But the death is allowing ourselves to do away with things that really are not bringing life in our lives anymore. And that can be a scary thing to really look at your life and go, I thought this brought me life, but it's really continuing me to stay in a loop that's not, it's a loop. It's like, this is really about getting out of loops that really are, it kind of reminds me of like a fishing rod that has no bait on it, but it's just still in the fucking ocean trying to pick up fish. It's just like, hey, you can pull it up, dude. Like, we're done for the day. You know, it's like, I got to catch something, you know, like, well, maybe we should try something else, or maybe, you know, I don't know. It's just like there's a huge part of this whole regeneration of life and death that's happening right now everywhere in life. But I think that if we look at it on our individual levels, it's like, okay, what's really feeding me and bringing me life and what's not? And I think we're all in that place where we want a breakthrough. Uranus, we all want the breakthrough, but the breakthrough is really in the, I'm going to give life to things that maybe I haven't given enough of a chance with, and I'm going to put an end to the things that I've given so much to that I haven't got the return back of life that I deserve. And that could be hard.
That is very hard for people.
I think that's the hardest part of this.
They have reasons, you know, they have reasons like, well, I've invested 30 years in this career. How can I can't stop now, to kind of like the inverse of what you were saying earlier. But
well, that's what's the interesting part is when you really look at it, is it really feeding you life that will still continue forward, or is the universe showing up with this like magnetism that's flipped on you now and it's repelling? It's there's signs everywhere saying no, 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 and it's like, oh man.
And your body is probably saying no as well. But
guaranteed.
People really suppress that, especially on an emotional level. They'll do anything to not have to deal with their feelings. And those feelings have all the truth for you, you know, beyond what your mind even knows what truth is. So, yeah, it's kind of a reckoning point. And you've got to really ask yourself. It does kind of
remind me of the old wrecking balls in New York at the beginning of the 20th century. You know, it's like North Node Uranus, Mars, Taurus. It's a very old school vibe coming back, and very like what we're not used to in society. You know, it's like when you hear construction now, it's like they do it at a certain time. They do it the freeway at night when nobody's listening. Like, you know, we didn't do society that way. Like society was never done that way. Back in the old days, they were building the church for 20, 30 years in the middle of the town, and they didn't care about your noise sensitivity or something like that, right? It was like, hey, we're creating something for God, you know, or whatever. So it's like people are kind of in that little curled up space of oh my gosh, the world's coming with wrecking balls, and it's kind of like, well, good, like, you know, like some of the stuff needs to end, and this is a moment where I think those that really want to thrive in life, who aren't afraid to cross the boundaries that they've put up themselves, because that South Node in Scorpio is very boundary, like it's illusionary boundaries we create within ourselves, right? That hold us back from, like, instead of looking at it as a wrecking ball, looking at it as a doorway, or even just a
liberator. Yeah.
That's a beeline to, especially I love that you've really helped bring it through the transit that's coming, the preciseness of that sixth line, right? That it's yours.
Yeah. It's not just a viable way. It's not just an ideal way. It's your way, your path. That's only yours is what's showing up. Are you brave enough to walk down that path because it's going to give you everything you've ever probably really wanted? That's hard for people to do too, because we fear the death that comes in realizing our dreams and goals. You know, like when we get there, that's almost as scary of a place of the unknown, because what happens after that? You know, so there's probably a lot of kind of upper limit type of psychology happening around this transit too, of like knowing that you can have it all in the way that works for you, but are you willing to like die to everything that you're used to in order to embrace that?
Well, and it reminds me of that last time South Node was with Uranus and Taurus at these degrees, which was the invasion into Poland, where there was enough warning signs there for a little bit that Hitler was going to invade. And it's one of those things to where if like you were to use it for now, it's kind of one of those moments where it's like, okay, God's giving me this very specific brave moment here to be like, maybe I should leave this country right now.
Yeah. Right.
Maybe I need to get out of here.
And no one around you is going to say, yeah, that's a great idea.
Exactly. People are like, no, your family's here. No, this is where the town is. You're so good to little baby Robinson that's down the street. You always, you know, like whatever, right? Like it just starts yanking on you, right? And it's like, oh, okay. And then boom, it all happens. And then it's no longer Poland anymore. And now it's like, oh no. And especially if you were Jewish back in the day, you were not put in a position you wanted to be placed in. But I think that it's one of those moments with the bravery, because it reminds me also, there's so much World War II with these transits that it's like, it reminds me of like even D-Day. It's like, as soldiers, like, it's not like there was a lot of organization when they all stormed the beach in Normandy. It was like, you kind of had to, if you watch Saving Private Ryan ever, it's one of those movies where it's like, what do we do next, sir? Like everybody's kind of like, we gotta get on the beach and we gotta get up there and we gotta figure our own way through to get there. We have to have the courage to do it. If we just sit here, we're gonna be dead. And that's the kind of
right. And if you listen to just your mind is going to tell you go right into getting shot. But if you're listening to your body and your inner authority, that pulse, that pace, that innate knowing can guide you through even the most chaotic battlefield. If you're really listening to that inner navigation, you're just outstepping those obstacles, those bullets, those whatever. But if you're all trying to do it here, you're not going to succeed. It's just not possible.
Like the mall shooting that just happened, and lucky that one young guy had his gun that he just got the permit for. But it's like one of those things where it's like, maybe your friends are wanting you to go to the mall and it just doesn't feel right for you. Something feels off. You don't go.
Exactly. It's those subtle.
I always, whenever I go on planes, I touch the plane. I'm like, does it feel good? Okay, it feels good.
Yeah.
But it's like, that might sound crazy, but it's like one of those things to where I've never let astrology stop me from, getting on a jet ski to race. Like I've gone on the most crazy Mars square Uranus transits, or even in my own chart, whatever. And I've been like, it feels okay, so I'm doing it.
Yeah.
And I think you had brought up earlier to me when we were in the library here about how really understanding your human design can get you through, or how did you put it?
When you live your design, when you're actually in alignment with your inner authority, the transits don't affect you. It's not that you don't experience them,
right?
But your energy selects the best of what that planetary energy is and parlays it into your process, instead of it just smacking you up the side of the head like a just random energy. So living your design puts you in the good graces of the transits, it keeps those harsher aspects out, where they just kind of pass over you. The storm passes over the village. And also, if there's something in there that's catalytic or can propel you in the right way, it's going to take that in and use that. But you don't need to even deal with the transits, you know?
Right.
If you're actually in that space of self-communion and of interconnection. And that's the beauty of being a 9-centered being. We don't need to be the super strategic 7-centered human anymore. We're here to be in the flow of life. And the mind is meant to be the passenger, meant to be the witness. So,
well, even with this north node of Mars and this north node of Uranus being conjunct in Gemini, it reminds me of like, okay, it doesn't have to be a mental transit as much as maybe just understanding the changes in the environment that are positive right now. Mm-hmm. Like, this is where if it's boring, it shouldn't be so boring. There's maybe the universe asking for you to change things up. Mm-hmm. Or if it's about, you know, if you're overthinking, maybe you need to journal it out right now.
Yeah, it's extremely powerful.
Right? Like or speak it with a friend right now.
If you're a self-projected or mental projector especially.
Yeah, because that could be pretty crazy.
Mm-hmm. There can be a lot of distortion otherwise.
Right. And I feel like Gemini always gets kind of the, you know, like basics, like, oh, it's just your mind. It's like so much more than that. It's really about, you know, making changes, you know, and being quick and witty without knowing everything. Sag is where we try to understand it all. Gemini is like, that's a dog. It's like a dog. Oh, that smells good. I'm going to go into that. What is that? It's like, oh, look at that. Oh, it's like a dog going in and like finding, you know, leftovers. Like, oh, that's great. Mm-hmm. It's like following the basic primal senses that stimulate you. Like, what's that? Oh, okay. You know what I mean? Like, and it's okay. Sometimes you might go into an environment and be like, oh yeah, that's the wrong place to be. But at least I walked through there. Mm-hmm. And then you learn something from it. Sometimes our intuition, or especially our response to things, might be to teach us something of like, okay, that's for sure not the place to be. Because it's a good contrast of where I really want to be. Mm-hmm. So sometimes you're never making the wrong choice if your gut told you to go somewhere, but you learned something and it made you redirect to where you need to go, especially in these kind of times. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that's where people can somewhat, I think, get a little bit of feeling of like, I'm failing because maybe you responded more in your life, or you've been making choices in your life because this seemed like it was going to be great or something, and it's not. And it's like, hey, instead of looking at it like you've been failing, look at it like, no, that's not it. At least that's off the list. Don't give up at this moment. And, you know, I think that's the whole, like, there is no guarantees on bets right now. I think that there's always the guarantee, though, of the universal bet on us. Mm-hmm. But our own, you know, perspective in the mind of things is crazy. When you actually are so like, no, for sure this is going to happen. Like, nah, Uranus. It's like, and it's like, even the things that maybe we believe won't happen, and they're really good things, do happen. Like, you know, the long shot can happen right now. Mm-hmm. And it's like one of those things where it's like the Hail Mary. There are moments in football where the Hail Mary works. And the touchdown happens, and that's a very North Node Uranus moment because it comes out of nowhere. It's like, I don't think that'll happen, and then it happens. Like, so it's like, I think I'm going to lose everything, and then the Hail Mary I'm throwing in my life, I don't know if it's going to work, and then you actually throw it, and holy shit, because it was divinely in your alignment.
I had a great visual. It's like the tall Nordic blonde aliens show up on the White House lawn. And they're like, we're here, your brothers from the stars, to save you in this time of great crisis. And at the same time, the actual good aliens show up, but they look freaking scary. You know, their physical appearance or something about their energy is so foreign or like offbeat or just unusual or hard
they're like
to
in
understand.
A cube ship or something.
And it's like something about it in the unknown is dark or scary to us, but it's actually that weirder looking visual, or that weirder, just, you know, that weirder choice. The more unusual choice, Uranus, is actually the more aligned choice. So the one with the extra filler and
doesn't look like a human anymore. And the one that looks like, if it looks too much like it literally just got off the makeup with Kim Kardashian and the Kardashians and is all polished. And that's kind of what has been said throughout time and religions.
Glam. They call it glam. Glamour is the illusion.
Exactly. But there's also that the Antichrist would be polished and be perfect, and that would have all the answers to all the problems. Whereas I almost feel like the true aliens would come and be like, here's some info for you to figure out on your own.
Oh, and this brings me to this quote from Ra that is perfect, that sums this up. And this kind of choice point, which is, here it is. There is something I've learned in my process about the nature of illumination. Whenever there is any experience I can remember that had any mystical value whatsoever, mystical meaning aligns us to our true path, at some level or another, I was in pain. It is so common in mystical experiences for those in the process of the mystical experience to suffer. It's the way in which you deaden the defense systems of the body and you make it more sensitive to being deeply impacted. Shock is about shattering. Nobody who can initiate you can provide you with the initiation. They can only set you up.
I love that. Well, especially, I mean, even in Buddhism, right? It's like life is suffering, but the moments that are great and that are mystical, when we have them, we have to appreciate them and know how beautiful they are. You know, people are trying to always escape pain or escape suffering, but it's like one of those things to where it's not so. I think it's about learning to accept life as it is, and know when the mystical experiences happen, they happen, and it's an extraordinary, beautiful thing. And it's the weird part of consciousness comes with unconsciousness. Like, I feel like the idea that somebody's woke all the way or fully enlightened, right, is like meaning that they have no unconscious moments still, when there's no way. I mean, even the last couple days or even hours or even minutes before your last breath are going to have some unconscious moments coming conscious, especially probably at that moment is when there's going to be the most conscious moments coming in and the most unconscious understandings coming through. So, it's like, and I think that's the other thing is people are always associating that there's a problem in life with going through pain or suffering when that gets us more in touch with who we really are and what we want to see change, and learning to accept that. I mean, it's like without pain, you would burn your hand on the stove every time.
Right.
Without pain, you would never really feel love.
And you would probably never know your true strength.
No. But that's the problem with creating a bubble around things, which is Uranus, North Node, Mars is definitely not. It's the opposite of
bubble
bubbles.
Burster, yeah.
It reminds me of the game Operation. Like, you're gonna hit the sides. Like, it's like your nerves are gonna be hit. Your nerves are gonna be rubbing on the side of a brick wall.
But you still got to move.
Right. You still got to move. Right. Like, it's one of those things to where, when you're in your passion anyway, or you're doing things, you don't even think about those things. Like, I'm jet ski racing, going crazy fast. I don't even realize that my toe's bleeding.
Yeah.
I don't realize it. I don't even feel it. Don't even notice it's happening. So it's one of those things too. Or even like, let's say when you come into your passion of creation or art or a business or something like that, and you're in the last thing you're thinking about is anything, period. You're not even thinking.
That's the flow state.
You're in the full moment, and you're in the edge of the moment. Or it's like when you're making love or sex, which Mars is very sexual energy, or sacral especially. I'm sorry to say, but I don't know anybody that, if they're truly immersed in their sexual energy, is thinking.
Right.
There's no such thing. Like, you are fully immersed, and even if you have a bad back or a bad that thing's gone. You know what bad back?
Yeah.
What bad issue or what issue, whatever. So we all go through these moments where it could be a subtle thing. Like, I'm not feeling good today. It's like, but at the end of the night, if you ended up having sex or something, I guarantee you're not thinking about how that was a bad moment today or da-da-da-da. I mean, it's really funny how we can really get ourselves caught up in our minds so bad. I feel like the suffering is really the mind.
Absolutely.
And Uranus energy definitely is very mental, but I think it's the way to disconnect from the way the mind works and allow the mind to innovate by not knowing and having unpredictable moments and following what seems crazy is not crazy. What's crazy is crazy, you know?
Yeah. It's like breaking out of that linear black and white, measuring everything, comparing everything. And it's like stepping into true cognition. And cognition is the state in which the universe is thinking through you. You know, the universe is thinking you. And tapped into that state, that's where we, you know, experience that limitless potential of creativity and flow state and, you know, the mom lifting the car off the baby.
Right.
You know, because the universe is moving through you. That's what we're here for. We're here to flow with that energy of pure consciousness, pure creation. And the more we get tripped up on all these little tabs open in our mind, the more just static and
frustration
and
anger,
bitterness.
Because this can bring up anger, this transit, a lot, especially if you are too many tabs open or you don't know how to hold your own value.
If every area of your life is a boundary that's been violated by your own volition of you not upholding it, then you're suddenly going to see all those holes in the story. You're suddenly going to see all those chains that are holding you, tying you into an experience that isn't even about you. It doesn't care about who you are. Just wants to use your energy. So you got to be the boss of that energy.
Yeah, because there really is no other. I think that's what the G Center is being the boss of your true connection to yourself and what feels aligned in the magnetics of the universe.
And from that place, having that full confidence that even if it means the universe has to move a mountain for you to maintain your direction, it's going to do that, you know? It's
guaranteed.
It's like being, you know, the Queen of the Dragons from Game of Thrones, which I didn't watch and I don't know that well, but like she just had this sense of purpose, you know, she had this sense of like this direction that was guiding her. And she created all this, she got all these people on her side and she moved, you know, masses of slaves, I think, and turned them into warriors and, you know, basically.
But then at the very end, she got so obsessed with the physical need to have the throne.
Right.
That she ended up torching and killing everybody in the town of Queen's Landing, of Queen's Landing. And then her lover had to kill her.
Because she was living the not-self.
And that's totally how this North Node Mars Uranus could go too, is you can feel almost like a manic high, but it's within the limitations that Pluto is at in the 60th gate and in Capricorn. But at the same time, it's also this understanding of Taurus of knowing, you know, are you continuing to give life or are you going now into kind of like Kali, South Node, Scorpio, kind of like, you know, crazy energy with it. Like we don't want to turn into destruction.
Right. We don't want to confuse that crazed energy with what true power is, because it's not. Yeah, and that's definitely a temptation here, is like seeing all of the inconsistencies, seeing all of the violated boundaries, seeing all of the false commitments, and just wanting to just destroy in order to reclaim in that kind of rage. But it's not even about that. It's about simply leaving the room, you know? It's not about burning down the house. It's about leaving the house.
Yeah, and I think it's also about knowing whenever you've got enough.
Right. When enough is enough.
When enough is enough. Like you can't, like there's no such thing as that you can have it all, right? Like because you couldn't even experience it all. Right? So I think it's about understanding that it's not a limitation, but it's a fulfillment understanding. Mm-hmm. Like, hey, I've got it. I'm fulfilled. Like this is great. Let me enjoy these things. Let me enjoy this life that I'm creating, and
Yeah.
what I can take this with. It's like, I can't have 5 iPads. I don't have 2 eyes. Right.
I don't need the $1 million. I just need this plot of land in front of me that I'm
Right.
growing things from. And that
Well, we don't even
satisfaction-
know where the world's going in the next couple of years, especially by the time we even do reach 2027, if people are even going to be around to even be taking money.
Right.
Like it's going to be resource energy, which I think when you bring up the 2 to the 14th gate, I mean, I think that this whole the changing of the resource is definitely going to be, I think, start with monetary,
Mm-hmm.
but I think people are going to start to realize that the real money in life is the quality of their life. The real money in their life
currency,
is a different form of currency of the beautifulness that we want to feel. And really Taurus is the paradiso. It's the paradise that we could be having in our life, which is pretty simple. Like, if you could get me on a nice, beautiful, deserted island with some music that I like and a beautiful partner and my friends and us to enjoy the coconuts and the beautiful, I would be fine.
Right.
That's all I need.
Mm-hmm.
I think if people really got to the bottom of it, which I think this transit's going to get to, is what is the thing that will fulfill you the most in your life.
It's
And why are you not doing that? And why are you spending all your time in all these other areas that are the complete opposite direction of that fulfillment?
Grinding yourself to the bone for a lifetime just to receive, Babylonian fiat currency that has no true meaning, value, or backing. Or I think also this huge redirect can actually be a lot of people being put in contact with the resources that they really need and being able to see that, however that looks.
Or it reminds me of like how social media or groups of friends that you could be around, it's like you think they might be serving you because they
Have
like
benefits,
your stories, or they make you feel like you're seen, but really are you being seen for who you really are, except maybe the version that they want you to see, and you're just fulfilling that for them. Like this is, I think, the scariest part of Uranus is where we could actually be fulfilling somebody else's value and not our own.
Mm-hmm.
And it's got to be a two-way street. It's got to be a multi-direction street, not just two-way.
Mm-hmm.
That's the other thing with Uranus. It has to be on all levels, from spiritual to the physical to how does it work for society? How do you work for your own values that you understand as somebody else? Like that's the whole Uranian multi-directional, multi-point kind of juncture point here, mm-hmm. where all the trains lead to one station kind of thing, right? Like, and I think that's where a lot of people are really frustrated, because you might be on a track that's connecting to one place, but it's missing so many other stations.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, are you on the right tracks? Are you in the right car? Are you driving correctly?
Are you just going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth on that track?
Yeah, and it also is liberation, right? Like, people don't know, but the Autobahn in Germany, which of course is the only highway in the world with no speed limit, was created, ironically, he was a Nazi, but he created it because of love. He wanted to be able to go as fast as he could in a car to get to his girlfriend, who was hours away, but it was only an hour away if he could do over 100 miles an hour.
Mm-hmm.
So he literally put all of his energy in creating that highway with no speed limits to be able to go see his love faster. So it's kind of interesting how that reminds me of this moment too, of we can build these beautiful highways to where we want to go in our life from love and where our real fulfillment is, and anything's possible at that point. But if it's coming from a place of the mind or a place of a true dissatisfaction or to please other people but not our own self, it's not going to work. Uranus will always throw
lightning bolts,
and it will also throw, the wheel will fall off the car. Like, you know what I mean? The flat tire happens. The car blows up. A
mongoose infiltrates CERN.
Right, out of nowhere, and blows the whole thing up.
Yeah.
And that's where I think that people have to start paying attention to right now is the closer and closer we get, which is basically from this moment you're listening to this, show, and then to where we're getting to here at the end of July and this beginning of August is, hey, you can see where the flat tires are going to happen. You can see the check engine lights are on right now. And this is a time where you pay attention to them in life, right? You don't ignore the limitation. You don't ignore things right now.
Yeah.
And it's okay to make a huge pivot right now. Like, that's the other thing. I think people are afraid of that. Like, gosh, but and again, it's always going to come back to what will everybody think? It's like, who gives a fuck? And that's the whole part of Uranus. Who gives a fuck? Like, and I think that's one of the weird parts are people are too afraid to be truly rebellious, which rebellious is not so much about being a rebel by going against what everybody wants to do. It's about being free and independent of what your journey feels like it's going to be, and flying free of the nest like a bird. Like, it's not, it seems rebellious, but it's really the breakaway point of place. This is a breakaway point. It's like, I'm breaking away from this energy. I'm breaking away from doing this. I'm breaking out of this loop. I'm breaking out of this cycle. And you're broken the more that you don't free yourself. Like, it's not that you're fixing yourself. It's getting out of staying broken.
If it can be broken out of, it needs to be broken out of.
Yeah. And there's some things that can't be because they're divinely meant to still stay in order. And there's some stuff, there's a lot of stuff right now though that's really kind of a fresh sheet of paper. Like, there's that feeling of fresh in Taurus, like not like Irish Spring fresh commercial or something. They brought those back, by the way. But it was like, it's definitely much more of a summer's breeze. There's much more of like a freshness of what we're all feeling. We all are at a moment where we're ready to start on a new piece of paper.
And that's the gift of Gate 1 is freshness.
Oh, well,
literally.
Yeah, there it is. So, well,
here we go.
Yeah, I think it's going to be extremely powerful. And I think it was great to have you dive deep into these gates for us to help us see this transit from a different lens. And especially where it really does affect us individually, which literally is individually. Especially at this time, I think a lot of people are looking for a breakthrough, and it's just when you're ready to just let the dominoes fall and
right.
And
one thing I think is super important to keep in mind is that a lot of times when we feel stuck or if we're looking for that breakthrough, we think, oh, I've got to make this huge shift. I have to get out of where I am 100% and just escape something. But the quickest way to your highest timeline is always through where you already are.
Right.
You can't let that black and white illusion of the mind trick you into thinking that there's some alternative that's better over there. Yes, there is, but to get there, it comes from embodying fully here and now first. That's the only way to get there. So
yeah, and it's usually just following the first door that's open to the next door to the next door. It's not trying to bypass a lot of doorways either. Like, right. There's no shortcut, right?
Or,
if anything,
make your own or whatever. Yeah.
Right. Like, the shortcut is actually just by going, well, this is the door that I'm supposed to open right now. Okay, let me open it, and then let me open that one. It's much more faster to open doors and try new things than it is to try and completely move a ship at port to another fucking ocean. It's just like, it's too long. It takes too long.
Yeah.
And Uranus, I want to say this. It's unpredictable, and it can come faster than literally as lightning. So the insight will come, and the response of, especially using human design or maybe the invite, it's just one of those things, or the initiation if you're a manifestor, it'll just be like, boom. And you can't think of that as crazy. It's crazy to not respond to the good feeling or initiate the action or say yes to the invitation that feels like it's been divinely orchestrated.
Mm-hmm.
Divine orchestration is very loud
Mm-hmm.
right now. And anything that's not, it's okay to not respond or do anything. And like non-action's better than action.
Mm-hmm.
And it could feel like a waiting game, but I think that the question really is it a waiting game, or are you not putting yourself in the position for the universe to allow that insight to come through too? You know, by being like, no, everything, I don't want anything to change. So I'm going to just stay in this. It's like, I think we all have to kind of just show up at the door or the lobby and be like, all right, my hand's up. I'm willing, God, to see what you got to show up with. And fuck, when you call my number, I'm there.
Yeah.
I'm there. You know what I mean? So.
And yeah, so I feel like there are many people listening to you and us right now that already have been knowing exactly what the move is. And
that's true.
They've, for whatever reason, been lingering in this hesitancy, this social people pleaser vibe, you know, the not self of the open heart, not feeling worthy or safe. But it's like this window is going to make it undeniable where the direction lies for you. And I think that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, it's not a time to throw it back into the mental bin and store it to the side and continue to be like, I'm going to keep contemplating. It's like, you want to look at it again? Like, it's like, yeah, it's like, that's, I think, the hesitation. That's another thing is Uranus gets you out of hesitation.
Right. It's like, you know, you're about to be handed the mic and half of the people are going to step up, even though they're super nervous and their throat's closing or whatever. And there's people that feel the mic being passed to them and they'll go to the bathroom and they'll miss the chance to hold the power, to hold like the amplifier, to hold the direction.
I remember in school, there was a lot of kids when it would be about reading. And sometimes the teacher would be like, you know, I was a teacher's pet because I liked to read because I couldn't handle some of these kids reading because they were so bad. So I would always raise my hand. And I had no problem reading out loud to class because I'd be like, at least I know how to read. But I would watch, you know, the teacher would be like, no, I'm going in order, right? And I could just see as it's going down, and you go to the bathroom. And then they missed their turn and they knew because they were too afraid of that moment to have. And who knows, 30 years ago, you know, like maybe if they would have read that, maybe that would have opened a doorway they don't like even realize.
That, guided the rest of their life.
I never knew I was going to be in communication for my life.
Mm-hmm.
But because I was like willing to just accept it, even though I was shy as hell, I enjoyed reading books out loud in class because I'd be like, gosh, you're going too slow. Like, let's go. I'd want to move on to recess. So, I don't know. I think that's a very, very, very powerful thing that you just picked up on is the microphone pass. Especially, or, you know, we don't really use numbers anymore like at the DMV. I think they still do, but, you know, like those old tear numbers. Mm-hmm. It's like, when your number's called, don't be afraid. Like, there's way more. I keep telling people this is the transit of the grass is greener on the other side.
Mm-hmm.
And in spirituality, it's always like, no, accept where you're at now, and you know, and it'll be fine. And it's like, you know, it's like, no, you can be where you're at now and still open some timeline energy here that's taking you to a better timeline in life.
Mm-hmm.
And it's taking whatever's supposed to come with you, and whatever's not, it's not.
And context wise, it's like a lot of this stuff that wants to be handed to you now simply wasn't possible prior to this time. Like before the restructuring of the past 2 years, we wouldn't have been able to connect to a lot of what's coming forth. Like it's so it's just really important to see that all that suffering that may have made you more like gun shy now, because you just feel like you've been through a lot, you've been through trauma, you're just kind of tired, maybe too tired to get the mic to grab it when it gets handed to you. It's like, no, this is the rewards for all that we've had to live through. This is the gift of the new opening because of the battles we've had to fight and win within ourselves and externally, and etc. And also, bifurcation means that you got to pick one, and if you don't pick, it's chosen for you, and there's a sealing that happens. It's like you get sealed into a timeline. So,
and you don't want to be sealed on somebody else's timeline.
Exactly. Because then you have no agency, you have no choice in someone else's timeline. You just become an NPC, even if you're in the full conscious experience of it, because of the mechanics of energy in our universe. You're in that experience until it's done. You have to see it through, even if it's not yours. And
we're already doing that this life.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like the most that we could do to at least have some version of our own timeline is always an amazing gift, not to squander.
Mm-hmm.
But I also think that it's one of those moments where if you think of hesitation and how people could be like, I don't know, I kind of... inside you're supposed to go to some event that'll change your life, but the fear comes and it's like, finding the excuse and the next excuse, and you're in your head about it. So when you talk about the microphone being, tired to take the mic up or anything like that, you don't know until the moment you grab the mic where your energy's at.
Mm-hmm.
The lightning bolt and the power that can come when you actually hold the mic might be completely on a completely new time frame and a new energy that you weren't feeling just minutes prior.
Mm-hmm.
That's how powerful life is. That you could be like, man, I was having a horrible day, and something comes in and changes your life. It's like one of those kind of things. It's like, hello, like, was it really that you were tired, or was it more that you were just not in the right energy?
Right. And when a person experiences that magic moment, then you know what it feels like. Prior to experiencing that, it can be really easy not to believe in that kind of miraculous energy. But the second that you have your first experience of, like, let's say you're a generator and you feel your first response and you follow it and you see where it takes you, there's no going back. That's an initiation. You're in a whole new recognition of your potential, what's possible, how life even works. And you get to just, in an instant, leave behind all that mental baggage.
Yeah.
So
that's what really this Uranus Taurus really is getting back into the physical vessel and the soul vessel together, and letting the mind just be literally in the aft of the boat. Just like, bye, just enjoy taking the pictures, enjoy capturing the moments for me to remember. And that's it.
Mm-hmm.
You're not here to be at the front of the bow of the boat and run this ship, because we all know when that happened in the Titanic, it didn't go too well. And that's the other crazy part of this, is this could be a Titanic moment for people where you're running the ship, everything looks fine in your mind, but there's an iceberg ahead and you're not turning fast enough because, that might be causing too much disruption for the passengers of my life.
Mm-hmm.
And they're going to go through a lot worse when you hit the fucking iceberg. It's going to fucking just boom.
That's it. Yeah.
And when you're in the water looking at the whole boat snapping in half, looking for a piece of wood, you're going to wish that you weren't running from in your contemplative mind, or fucking around with people that aren't worth it in your life, or worried about leaving people that really aren't valuing you anyway, and making the big steer on the boat and avoiding the iceberg. So
here we go.
Yep. All right. Well, you can catch us every Wednesday. We're here for Before Dawn. Of course, this is Dylan, the main man of human design, Maven. You can follow him. We've been putting up, Elizabeth has been putting the links on YouTube here for his Instagram. what is it? Human Design Maven.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, all my links are down below. Make sure that you join us on highvibe.tv for all the awesome daily horoscopes, weekly horoscopes, and so forth. I always film Deep Astrology right after this show, my weekly astrology show. So thanks so much for all your support. Thank you, Dylan, and we'll see you all next week.
See ya.